Hello, I'm Caroline Husbands. I'm the vicar at Holy Trinity Church in Dilton, Marsh. And I've been asked to share with you a little bit of my journey as to what made me come to the decision of wanting to profess my vows with the community of Aidan and Hilda, which I did just a few weeks ago. And I guess there really is, I'm going to start at the beginning of the story, which is that I have as a child, I always had a sense that God was calling me, that God was talking to me, that there is a sense of God with me. And I didn't grow up in a Christian family as such, but I had a sense that I wanted to get to know God better. And so I just remember once saying, I need to go to church, Mum, because there they can tell me about God. And so I started going along to church, and I went to Sunday school, and I wanted to go. And I used to take my siblings with me as well. So I have got two sisters and a brother, and so they used to come with me in time as well. And then through life, as I grew up and did various different things, I always had a sense that God was. I don't know. Do you remember that advert with the Rev'd and a sense of orange glow? There was a hand, and or the body had this big glow, and I always had a sense that God's hand was kind of over me in this orange glow, and just that I knew that God was always with me, and that I could always rely on God. And so I wanted to develop that sense of faith and relationship with God, wanted to know God better. As an adult and with my own family, I started attending a church, and the vicar there kind of introduced some of the Celtic liturgies that were available from Northumberland or through the Northumberland community and through Iona. And I found that the words within the liturgies were very poetic, were very natural. They spoke of nature and God through nature, and they just drew me in, and I wanted to know more, and so searched out various different publications. I've read quite a few different books, and wanted to know more about what does it mean to be a Celtic Christian, and what does that mean for us today, and are there things that we can learn, because we are so many years later, 1500 years later, we have the church as it is. But are there things that we can learn from the Celtic church, and how would that translate for today, and for us being able to reach out to those people who don't know about God today? And I discovered that there is a whole wealth of information and a huge following, and uh, just tremendous things that we can learn from one another, that we can learn from history, that we can learn from different people groups from across the world. There is much wisdom, and God is constantly revealing God's self to us. So, part of my exploration, some of you may remember that when I first came here, I had a real longing, yearning to go to Lindisfarne. And I went to Lindisfarne and for my retreat. It was a huge journey. I just loved it. I went by plane, train, taxi, walked, bus as well. I forgot the bus. So it was kind of using almost every means of transport that I could, save a boat. I didn't get to go on a boat, but using every means of transport. So it felt like it was a real pilgrimage. It was a big journey, and it took me quite a bit of time to get there. And when we go on a retreat, it's about being intentional about wanting to spend time with God. So I'm removing myself away from the ordinary busyness, and wanting to immerse myself in prayer, in having that one-to-one with God, and opening myself up before God, and allowing God into the recesses of my own heart. And those, particularly those areas where day by day, week by week, I try not to travel too deeply, whether it's because there's painful experiences I'm holding in there, or something that I haven't worked through yet. So when I go on retreat, it's an opportunity for me to relax and just allow myself to love God, and allow God to love me just as I am. So I went to this retreat at Lindisfarne, and I intentionally chose the retreat leader that I went with, and I went with Ray Simpson. Now, his name may be familiar to you. He's written books such as Celtic Daily Light. He's written other prayer books. He's written on the Celtic saints and Cuthbert, Aidan, and Hilda, and various others. He's led lots of retreats across the country, and I wanted to see who he was. He'd written these books, and I was feeling really drawn to Celtic spirituality and to the Celtic way of life. And I wanted to see Ray and to meet with Ray. And I had some questions I wanted to ask him. And he talked about, during this retreat, about the community of Aidan and Hilda and how they seek to live a dispersed monastic life. So we're part of a community, but it's dispersed, and we are fed by our Celtic spirituality. And the Celtic Christians fully believed that there are two great books for which we can learn more about God. One was through the Holy Scriptures, and the second was through the book of nature, that God is constantly revealing himself to us. We just have to be open and ready to hear, to look, to see, to feel, to sense God's presence with us. So the community of Aidan and Hilda openly, readily put themselves in such a way, carry themselves so that they are ready and expectant and wanting to hear from God. And they lay themselves at the feet of God, enabling and asking God to use them as he will. And we try to be satisfied with all that God has in store for us. And I say we try because there are always times when we struggle. We are human, like each and every one of us, and we find that sometimes there are times when we struggle and don't quite understand, or it seems too hard, too difficult, too painful. But we lean in to God at those times. So when I took my vows, I wanted to join up with the community. One of the things that really excited me about the community was that they follow a framework, and it's based on one way it was explained to me, it's based on the way markers. Now, if you've been to Lindisfarne or you've seen pictures of Lindisfarne, you might recognise this. Can you see that? So here we've got the way markers, and at low tide, you can walk across the mud and the sand, and it is safe. As long as you follow that path, you are safe. And if you stray from it, you will find that the mud is, pull your boots off your feet and that sort of thing. And then when the tide's in, there's a causeway nowadays. But you used to be able to just get to Lindisfarne using these way markers. And so the community have used these way markers to pin a kind of like a rule of life. I don't know if you've experienced a rule of life, but it's a framework to help us to order our lives so that we can live our lives as Christians with integrity. So they cause us to look into particular areas of our life and to think, well, what value am I placing on this? And is my value rightly placed on this? Or am I disregarding God and Christ's teaching by doing this? And so they cause us to look at specific areas. And through the past year, during our lockdown, in fact, I was taking a course and looking at those different way markers and trying to develop my understanding as to what they mean and what they would mean for me personally. And so reflecting on those through the year, that's where I came to the point where I'm ready to make my vows. And actually, this is the way of life that I want to follow. And that's what I've done. A part of my vows were to say, I give myself without reservation to God, the three of limitless love. I seek to know Christ better and make him better known, to live simply that others may simply live, to fight the spiritual war and to follow the example of Aidan, Hilda, and other saints. I commit myself to simplicity, purity, and the honouring of those I am responsible to. I undertake, as God permits, to follow a daily rhythm of prayer, work, and recreation, to meet with my soul friend, and to make an annual retreat. And I will pray for and meet with the community using its prayer diary and patterns of prayer. They're very special vows, and they are things that I feel right deep in my heart, that those are things that I need to practice. And I mean that practice, I need to practice practicing them, and hopefully day by day we'll do a little bit better. But we remember that we're never a completely finished work. We're always journeying towards who Christ has called us to be. And ultimately, Christ has called us to be beacons of light, to be the expression of his love in our communities. And I seek to do that. And I ask for your forgiveness for those times when I don't get that quite right. And but I also hope and pray that there will be times when I get that right. And I hope there'll be times when we can rejoice and celebrate together in God's love and all that God has done for us, and share that readily with the people that we come into contact with day by day. As an expression of living in the community. So as when I was ordained, I made vows, and which entitles me, I suppose, to wear a dog collar. It's a outward symbol that I have joined in with the church, that I'm a church leader, that I endorse the church's teaching. And as an outward sign, I was given this cross. Can you see that there? So it's a Celtic cross, it's wooden, and you can see A and H for the community of Aidan and Hilda. And Aidan and Hilda are two great leaders. And I'm going to talk especially a little bit about Hilda. Hilda really is a role model for me. So I just think she's a wonderful, amazing woman. So she was very much schooled in the Roman way of church. And then she met Aidan, and she was really influenced by the Celtic way of things. And so she strove to draw them both together because there are massive strengths in both. And she sought to create unity between the different monks. So the monks of the Celtic tradition, the monks of the Roman tradition. And bear in mind that in those days, monks were both men and women. So monks was a term that described both men and women who studied and practiced the faith. So Hilda was the leader, and she had a community in Whitby, and what she supported, or what she created in a sense, was a village of God. So you know that there was a big abbey on the top of Whitby on the hill, and but there was a free flow of people that went from the church, that went down to the village, and the villagers came up to the church, and there was a free flow of people, and people rubbed shoulders with each other. They taught, they healed, they so the monks built hospitals and schools, and were training people and teaching people the faith. And the work, the village, the community, they worked together to produce crops and food, and they would have great big sing-songs and wonderful feasts and storytelling, and it was a real community of God. And one of the things that's quite striking for us today is that Hilda, in the monastery, the abbey, was a leader of both men and women, and they had men and women who were monks, who studied together, who prayed together, who in effect lived together, and so is a real role model, because that is very much what church is like today. And when we live in community and we live as a family and we do that well, that there are men and women who come along to church, who profess the faith, and then who seek to live out with integrity that calling into the communities and the relationships where they are, whether that's with their family, with their neighbours, with their workmates, with the different groups that they belong to. They share their faith just by being who they are, and then praying um, for situations and for people at times of trouble and distress, but also being quick to celebrate and wonder and praise God when everything's all going well. So that's given you a little bit of insight. I hope that's interesting. If you want to ask me anything about the community, please do come back to me, because it's only a little snippet. I can say more another time. If you're interested in the Dilton Marsh Parish magazine, I have been writing just a very brief explanation as to each of those way markers. And just to say that those way markers and the things that I've written have been very much part of what this book is called A Pilgrim Way, and it's New Celtic monasticism for everyday people. And it was written by Ray Simpson. So if you want to read more, you're very welcome to borrow the book, or if you want to buy it yourselves. And it's got a lot more information in there about the different way markers and how you might want to create your own framework, or just allow yourself to challenge in a particular area. You know, how can I do this that speaks more of the faith that I have for God, and speaks the love that I have for God? How can I do this that is authentic to that love? So I hope you enjoy traveling with God in your journey of faith. God bless.